engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11.
The space race was a 1950s to 1970s competition between the United States and Soviet Union for supremacy in space exploration. The USSR started off strong after launching Sputnik 1 into orbit in 1957. It was the first artificial satellite. In response to Sputnik 1, President Dwight Eisenhower created the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, known as NASA, in 1958. NASA was very important in the space race as it created key space programs including Project Mercury, Project Gemini, and the most important, the Apollo program. Project Mercury was the first human spaceflight program in 1958, which had hopes of launching a man into orbit before the Soviets. They were able to successfully launch a man into orbit, but after the Soviet Union, thanks to Yuri Gagarin, who completed an orbit of the Earth in April 1961. Shortly after, John F. Kennedy talked in front of the American public about aims for U.S. space programs to get to the moon before the end of the 1960s.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth. No single space project in this period will be more impressive to mankind or more important for the long-range exploration of space, and none will be so difficult or expensive to accomplish.
After Project Mercury, NASA created another program named Project Gemini. It was the second American human spaceflight program, launching in 1962. It was created to develop space techniques for future launches. Gemini was an improvement to Project Mercury as it had enhancements in the spacecraft, evolving from carrying one crewman to two. In 1968, that is where the NASA space exploration programs really took off. The Apollo program was the third spaceflight program and allowed for there to be 3 crewmen in the spacecraft. The Apollo program had a rough start. Apollo 1 had a cabinet fire, killing all 3 crewmen in the spacecraft. After this accident, for the next 5 Apollo missions, they were not manned missions. Apollo 8 was monumental, as it successfully left Earth's orbit and managed to orbit around the moon successfully. Then on July 20th, 1969, at 8 p.m., the Apollo 11 crew was successfully able to land on the moon.
I'm going to step off the limb. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Columbia, Columbia, this is Houston, ALS, over. Houston, Columbia, engage, over. Roger, the EVA is progressing beautifully. They're setting up the flag now. I guess you're about the only person around that doesn't have TV coverage of the scene. That's all right, I don't mind a bit. They've got the flag up now, and you can see the stars and stripes on the lunar.
The Apollo 11 crew consisted of Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins. The Apollo program thrived until its last successful mission, Apollo 17, in 1972, and had 6 missions landing on the moon. A great part of the success of NASA was due to its great amount of funding. But by about 1969, the funding for the space program began to deteriorate and continues to fall. In 1966, the budget peaked at 3.3% of the federal budget, but is currently at 0.48% of the federal budget today. Many groups are trying to help NASA with better funding by creating campaigns such as Penny for NASA, which advocates for doubling the funding of NASA to about 1% of the federal budget. Having NASA be well funded again can be beneficial in the future and create new discoveries.
I was shaking here, but what a beautiful